I look over to see the South Fork of the Snoqualmie, but I see something standing there that shouldn't be there. And it's about an 8.5 foot tall cinnamon colored Sasquatch that is faced away from me, kind of looking northeast. So you have the bend in the river. There's some like houses over here. Then you have a tree line over here and a road. So I'm not sure what it was looking at across the river, but I could see it standing there. So how I got into the whole Bigfoot Sasquatch thing is, well, I didn't know it growing up, but I didn't know they were talking about Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but my parents would refer to the hairy man or the woolly booger. And usually the context for that was I was a free range kid in the 60s and 70s. You know, we played all day. We're gone from home, didn't worry about us. But my parents or grandparents would always say, "Little Jimmy, make sure you're home before before dark so the woolly booger doesn't get you." I didn't know then what they were talking about, but now I kind of have the context for it. And kind of how that came to be is right around 2 years ago, it was June of 2023. I was off-roading with a bunch of friends up around Mount Baker, and we'd planned on camping for the night. So we spent the whole day running dirt roads, exploring, mapped a couple trails, and then when it's too snowy up on the mountain, it's a big parking lot made of gravel that you can park in. So we decided to camp there for the night because it was kind of a nice area. We were spread out around a big circle, so nobody was like right next to each other. I'd had my 4Runner for about a year, and it just put a rooftop tent on it. So I was really excited to use my rooftop tent, and I had an annex for it. So and I can provide pictures of it at the campsite so you can kind of see what it looked like. But if you'll imagine a 4Runner with a big rooftop tent, and the rooftop tent where it comes off on the passenger side, there's an annex that zips into that, so the ladder area is covered, and it gives you like a whole big tent to hang out, do whatever, change clothes. So part of all the excitement was setting that up for the first time and using it. And everything was pretty normal. We had a few beers around the campfire, talked, told ghost stories and stuff. And then I went to bed. We pretty much all older guys go to bed around 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. No late nights for us. But I crawled up in my tent, and the tent has a special lining that helps darken it from sunlight. So it is like extra dark up in there. You can't see your hand in front of your face. I go to sleep, and something woke me up around 12:30. I looked at my watch, and I'm laying there like really intently listening, trying to figure out, what is this sound? And the best way that I can describe it to you is if you've ever been parked on gravel in a vehicle and you turn the wheels and that sound that it makes, that is exactly what I heard, was this sound. And I can hear it walking around my vehicle. And as it's going around the vehicle, I'm now sitting up in pitch darkness and just like really intently listening, trying to figure out, what's going on. Is this somebody, coming in to steal from the camp or what? But it sounds too big. And as it makes its way around, I get more and more nervous, and I'm getting more and more afraid. I'm not armed or anything. I don't even have a knife up there. And it's so dark you can't see anything, and I think that helps magnify the terror. I can still feel it in my chest right now. What I was feeling then is the unknown. And, what is this what sounds like a large thing doing? So it makes a full circuit around my rig. So it started from my right side, slowly walking around, around the front, and I can hear it all the way around. And it gets to where the annex is. And then I'm going to ask you to use your imagination again, but imagine you've never seen something before. And you're curious. I believe Sasquatches are very curious by nature. They're highly intelligent. And I think I believe what attracted it to my rig and my setup is I was the only one there with a rooftop tent and even with an annex, and maybe it had never seen one or something like that before. And it wanted to touch it. So in the dark, I can hear something reach out and grasp the fabric of the annex and kind of stretch it. It makes a really weird sound, and I can hear the zipper jiggle, and I'm just beside myself at this point. I'm pretty terrified, can't move. I'm not even sure if I was taking a full breath at that point. And I think I made a sound or something, and then it moved away. So at some point I was able to get back to sleep. I wake up in the morning as soon as it's light, and I think there was around 5:30, I could hear people talking. So I climbed down out of the tent, put on my shoes, go out, and I'm like immediately asking my friends, did y'all see anything last night? Did you hear anything around 12:30? Were you around my rig at 12:30 at night? Whatever it was, if you were, just let me know. And everybody was like, well, what's going on? I'm like, well, I just heard something. So later that day, I was back over where the campfire is. So it's kind of up on a hill a little bit above my rig. And, I forgot. So going back, I've got the rooftop tent on the passenger side. An important part of this is on the driver's side, I had an awning. An 8x8 awning that you pull out that sets on two poles. I had a camp organizer hanging on that awning that had tent stakes in the bottom to keep it from blowing in the wind, things like that. And then they're useful to put camp gear and stuff in. So when I was walking around my rig and checking everything, I didn't see the awning. The camp organizer. And I thought, it was just a camp raider came in and they stole that organizer. And that explains it. It wasn't anything weird. I didn't have any reason to be afraid. It was just a thief. So later in the day, I'm over at the campfire area, we're making food, and I look over at my rig, and I see, well, the organizer isn't gone. It is on top of the awning, which is about 8 feet up in the air, and it is completely stretched out on the awning. So I walk over there, and I'm looking at it, and I have to get a step stool to get up there because I can't reach it. And I pull it down, and I'm standing there like an idiot, throwing it up in the air, trying to recreate what I found. Like if a gust of wind blew through there and blew it up on top of the awning. I'm looking for any reasonable explanation at this point. And I never could do it because of the tent stakes. It would only go like a foot and a half, maybe 2 feet, and it would be all crumpled and everything. But I think not only was there a Sasquatch walking around my rig and messing with my tent, but I think it also decided to have a little fun with the human and kind of pull a little prank and take that organizer and lay it out. But man, that completely blew my mind. And that was really kind of the origin story that got me dying curious, what's going on. I couldn't see it with my eyes, but I knew something very large had been there, and I wanted to try to explain it, and that kind of led me down the path that I'm on now. Besides, one of my hobbies is overlanding, and I do that a lot, and I disperse camp remotely a lot. And last November, I'd gone over to Crescent Bar in Eastern Washington to camp for the weekend by myself, kind of do a solo thing, decompress. Everything was fine. I didn't see anything, nothing weird happened there. it was coming back home that I had this mind-blowing experience. So I'm coming down I-90, headed west towards Seattle, come down the pass, and I'm coming up on North Bend, Washington. If you're familiar with I-90 coming into North Bend, there's several variations of the South Fork, or the Snoqualmie River. So the very first one you come to is the South Fork of the Snoqualmie, and it's really close to a fire training center. There's a little road there. And every time I drive by there, I always look over in the riverbed to see what the river level is. I don't know why I'm curious about it, but I do that with every river. I want to see like how high it is. Can you see river rock? Is there anything, weird there or whatever? So it's about 1 o'clock, maybe 1:15 in the afternoon on a Saturday, November 10th of last year, 2024. I'm going about 70 miles an hour in the right-hand lane. There's a light rain falling. And I look over to see the South Fork of the Snoqualmie, but I see something standing there that shouldn't be there. And it's about an 8.5-foot tall, cinnamon-colored Sasquatch that is faced away from me, kind of looking northeast. So you have the bend in the river. There's some like houses over here. Then you have a tree line over here and a road. So I'm not sure what it was looking at across the river, but I could see it standing there. I could see the head. Wasn't super conical, but came up a little bit and went like immediately into its neck. And I thought for a second it must be a Toungate, because we don't have necks either. And then its shoulders, oh my God, the shoulders were like 4.5 feet wide and humongous. Just the size of this thing and the amount of time that I saw it was mind-blowing. And I was like, wait, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? Because I can't believe this. There's a Sasquatch standing 100 yards, 75 to 100 yards off I-90 in the middle of the day where God and everybody could see it. Like, why is it there? Is kind of what's going through my mind. So getting back to the details of the Sasquatch, so I could see it was kind of a cinnamon colored. Its arms were down by its side. Its fingers were down below its knees. It had huge legs, huge arms. Looks like, it's used to tossing logs all day. It's hard to describe the bulk that you see unless you actually see it with your own eyes. But it is like mind-blowing to see, like, I've heard it before, but now I've seen it. And I've gone from, being a kid, going and seeing Boggy Creek, Legend of Boggy Creek at the drive-in, to, all the stories growing up in search of all of that, to now being a knower and having actually seen the creature standing there. So I was on a podcast maybe a month and a half ago talking about these experiences, and somebody reached out to me afterwards because I gave my email address and said, hey, Jimmy, I'm a hunter, and last October I was coming down I-90 into North Bend, and in the same place I saw a Sasquatch in that riverbed. And so now I'm like, oh wow, I knew for myself that I had seen it, but now I'm feeling some validation that not only did I see something there that shouldn't have been there in the middle of the daytime, but now somebody else has confirmed that they've seen that as well. And it was probably around the same time of day. So now I'm starting to wonder, like, is that a thoroughfare for them on the South Fork of the Snoqualmie coming down out of the mountain, or what? So I plan on going back to that area and investigating. But I've gone back out there and driven by. There's no place to pull over there, but like I said, there's a road. So I want to go down there and do some further investigation. But that led me to starting to go to conferences, try to meet people, socialize on Facebook. I attended couple of different conferences, and I met Craig Yanni at Squatch Fest and became his research partner. So I'm out actively researching an area north of Darrington with him. Started my own podcast, Off-Road X-Files, that focuses on experiences that people have while on a dirt road, Forest Service road, or dispersed camping. I know if it's like happened to me camping, it has to have happened to other people, and it helps to talk about it. Every time I talk about it, I feel a little bit better, and it may also encourage somebody else to come forward. So I try to be more vocal about it. Why? Why is it standing right there? It just stopped, and like, what did it see that caught its attention? What is it that a Sasquatch is curious about? I don't have an explanation for that, and I'm like dying to know. Like, what was it that made it stop there, and why was it there in the middle of the daytime? And I hear this over and over. I've probably listened to thousands of interviews now on different podcasts with people telling their experiences, and over, you have people, broad daylight, see them standing by the road or crossing the road. And it's almost like maybe it feels safe there, like you can't get to it readily. It would take a lot of effort to get to where it was, so maybe like it's a safe spot for it to stop. So prior to my experience in June of 2023, I definitely believed there was a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. It was like all the craze in the early 70s with the legend of Boggy Creek, and the only other thing I can think of that was maybe made a bigger impact on cinema at that time was The Exorcist and Jaws. Like, those two films captured the interest of the world, and I think the legend of Boggy Creek did too. And so there was a lot of people talking about Boggy Creek. Growing up in Round Rock, Texas, you heard stories about woolly boogers or the hairy man. There's a hairy man road in Round Rock, Texas. So it's prevalent there too, especially even in eastern Texas. So to answer your question, I believed they existed, but I thought it was on a limited scale. Now I believe they're all over. Everywhere where there's forest, I think they're probably there, or they move through there. What would I want people to know about my experiences? They happened. They happen when you least expect it. Especially the whole deal with the sighting on I-90 in November of last year. I mean, this was just last year. I wasn't expecting that at all. The last thing I would have expected to see right there in that riverbed was a Sasquatch. A giant bird or something sitting on the ground feeding on a deer or something. I could believe seeing that. Having a Sasquatch standing there, my mind did a reset as I'm driving down the road there, and I'm thinking, did I really just see that? No, I couldn't have seen it. It had to have been a stump or something. And so that's why I ended up going back out there, is to look and see, is there anything that could explain it? Was there deadfall? Was there, a big tree stump? Something that had washed down the river that's 8.5 feet tall and has cinnamon-colored hair hanging off of its arms about this long, like a log is going to have that. Maybe it has some old bark or something, but I know what I saw. And the only explanation is, it was a Sasquatch standing there, and then somebody else saw it too. So I guess what I would say is, always be on the lookout. You never know when you might see one or where you might see one. So the flow of traffic on a Sunday afternoon around 1 o'clock on I-90 West is usually pretty good. People are coming back from being on the east side of the mountains, visiting family, camping, recreating. Oh my God, there's so much recreating over there. Traffic is usually pretty heavy, and that day there were 3 lanes worth of traffic And I'd kind of gotten tired of fighting the fast lane. And so I just kind of slowed down. I was chilling in the slow lane all the way over to the right where I could just mind my business and not get aggravated. That's how much traffic there was. I didn't want to be aggravated. So to have like a Sasquatch standing there with that much traffic, I couldn't have been the only one that saw it. I mean, it was a good 7,500 yards off of the highway, standing there in the open. It was so big you couldn't miss it. Let's talk about orbs for a moment. So growing up as a kid, one of my grandfathers lived in East Texas in the little town of Newton. It's a few miles from Louisiana in the big piney woods. And we would go out and visit him. And then I spent at least 2 or 3 whole summers with him from the time that I was 12 until it's probably 12, 13, 14. Around those years, I spent all those summers at my grandfather's place. Going into my adulthood before he passed away. So his little place was called Buckhorn Valley, and it was just like a little 2-bedroom house, like a little ranch house, a lot of sandy clay, red dirt, big pine trees, and I would spend my days hunting with a BB gun or a .22 in the woods. But in the evening time, and like nobody really talked about this, but in the evening time around dusk, frequently we would see an orb that would float from the tree line. So that behind his house is a meadow. It's maybe 200 yards big. And there's trees surrounding this little meadow, and we kept horses and stuff out there. But this orb would float from the tree line to the right, and it would go probably about 5 or 6 feet high at that distance across this meadow and into the other tree line, but it didn't bob. So it wasn't like somebody walking with a lantern, with a flashlight, with a headlamp. And from the distance that it was at, maybe 150 yards away, it appeared to be about the size of a big grapefruit. So at 150, 200 yards, it really had to have been about the size of a basketball or larger. But I saw this orb for a period of years, from the time I was 12 to the time that I was in my 20s when I would visit. And it wasn't every night, but some nights around dusk, you would see this orb just float right across that meadow. I have no explanation for it. I don't know what it was. I think it was the most interesting thing about that to me is that it was repeatable, and it happened over and over again through a large period of my life. I don't think it's swamp gas or anything like that. It didn't seem to be like plasma in the sense that it was like undulating or anything like that, or like electricity. It was just this white light. And it was fairly bright for that distance. I mean, it was readily noticeable. As soon as it started coming out of the trees, you'd just kind of see it and stop and watch it go across. I don't know if it's some kind of spirit or something like that. I would love to know what it is. I've thought about it so many times over the years, but I don't know what it is, but I'd love to.